Jackson had heard the whispers for weeks. Rumors that felt too bold, too strange to be true. A small, nearly forgotten pharmacy on the city's edge, they said, was quietly handing out expensive medication without asking for money. No insurance, no bureaucracy, just medicine given away. That morning, Jackson left his office tower not as the man on magazine covers or boardroom walls. No security, no staff, no limo with shaded windows. He dressed down, faded jeans, a second-hand coat, and a baseball cap with a bent brim. In his pocket, a worn prescription. In his chest, a heart condition he'd ignored for too long. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, to feel what it meant to walk into a pharmacy with nothing but hope and need. The moment he stepped inside, the place felt nothing like the polished clinics his company funded. The air was cold and carried the sterile scent of floor cleaner and antiseptic. No background music, just the hum of machines and the occasional clink of glass. A young pharmacist stood behind the counter, her coat plain, her face calm. Her name tag read Elra. Jackson approached quietly. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. The name he used was fake. His posture wasn't. Shoulders hunched, voice low, he handed over the slip of paper. She glanced at the prescription, tapped a few keys, and then looked up, her tone almost apologetic. 820. He opened his wallet, fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the truth of it. $30, maybe less. Crumpled bills stared up at him like a punchline. He didn't say a word. Their eyes locked. A heartbeat passed. Then, without fanfare, she placed the medication into a small paper bag and pushed it gently toward him. "Take care of yourself," she whispered. He froze. Jackson had built an empire by believing in systems, in rules, in control, in the idea that if you made the medicine, you could make the world better, but only if you kept tight hold of who got what and how. His childhood was no stranger to suffering. He grew up in a cramped apartment above a tire shop. His father worked nights. His mother skipped meals so he and his sister wouldn't. They lived paycheck to paycheck, one illness away from disaster. When his grandfather died from a stroke, no one could afford the medication that might have saved him. That pain never left him. It calcified into resolve. He promised himself, if he ever held power, he'd never let people fall through cracks again. He built his company on that promise: rules, structure, pricing algorithms, strict compliance. Because rules don't forget, rules don't get tired, rules don't play favorites. But that day, holding $800 worth of medication he hadn't paid for, handed over by a stranger who asked nothing in return. The rules felt flimsy, not wrong, just incomplete. 3 weeks before this encounter, Jackson had reviewed a quarterly audit from compliance. It was standard. Procedure. Most reports were clean. This one wasn't. A small location on the city's west side showed repeated inconsistencies. High-value cardiovascular drugs missing from inventory. No break-ins, no billing errors. Just vanishing product. The phrasing was careful. Possible unauthorized distribution. But Jackson didn't need careful. He could read what was left unsaid. Someone was giving away medicine, and not just once. The numbers weren't massive. $15,000 over 3 months. But it wasn't about the money. It was about order, about the integrity of the machine he'd built. So he picked up the phone. No warning, no team. Just one sentence. "I'm going down there myself." It had been years since he visited a location in person. He left everything behind. No assistant, no briefcase, no status. He even dyed the gray from his beard, threw on old sneakers, and stuffed $300 into a weathered wallet. He walked into a downtown clinic like anyone else and asked for a prescription for a generic heart medication, one his own company manufactured. He gave a fake name, not because he was ashamed, but because he needed to know. Not from spreadsheets, not from executive summaries, but from the faces of those breaking the rules, from their tone, their decisions, their humanity. The West Side Pharmacy, flagged in the audit, was tiny, wedged between a laundromat and an abandoned gas station. The neon sign above the door flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay lit. Inside, it was even quieter than he expected. No customers, no sound, except for the soft clacking of a keyboard and the hum of a refrigerator. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 20s, hair tied back, blue coat. No makeup, no pitch, just presence. Her name tag said Elra. Jackson handed her the prescription and told her he didn't have insurance. She paused, typed, then said again, $8.20. He opened his wallet. 3 bills. That was all. She didn't flinch. She looked at the money, then at him. Something shifted in her eyes. Not pity, not surprise. Recognition, maybe. Then, she reached beneath the counter. No questions, no forms, no insurance talk. No offers of payment plans or coupons. Just quiet. She placed the pills into a paper bag and said, "You can pay later. Just take care of yourself." He took the bag in silence, confused, ashamed, a little angry. This wasn't how the world worked. Not his world, but something about her, her certainty, her calm defiance, made it clear. This wasn't her first time, and it wouldn't be her last. Jackson stepped outside, but he didn't leave. Not really. He crossed the street and sat on a cold metal bench. Coffee from a vending machine steamed faintly in his hands. He watched the door swing open and closed, watched who came, watched what happened. An old man arrived with a plastic bag full of coins. Elra counted it, said nothing, then handed him pills, and gave him a few coins back. Later, a young woman entered, toddler wailing on her hip, holding a torn prescription like it might fall apart. Elra nodded, disappeared into the back, returned with medicine. No charge, just a soft, "Take care." It wasn't an act, it was a pattern, quiet, practiced, deliberate. And then, Jackson noticed something else, something that struck deeper than any audit ever had. Every time someone walked away without paying, Elra reached under the counter and pulled out a small, battered notebook, faded blue, corners bent. Inside, she wrote with a simple black pen, names, dates, what was owed. Sometimes just a note, "Come back next Friday." Not chaos, not rebellion. Something else entirely, a system of trust. And suddenly, Jackson wasn't sure which system made more sense. The one he built with algorithms and control, or the one she ran with faith, a pen, and a paper bag. It wasn't chaos. It was deliberate, methodical. Elra wasn't careless. She was committed. Each act of quiet defiance was rooted in precision. And the more Jackson watched, the more he realized this wasn't theft. This wasn't negligence. It was something more dangerous to the system he'd built. It was belief. A belief that maybe, just maybe, the system didn't always know best. Sitting there on that cold bench, notebook still in his mind, Jackson felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with his heart condition. Elra wasn't trying to sneak around. She wasn't hiding. She was simply choosing to help where the rules refused. Near sunset, the bell above the pharmacy door gave its usual hollow chime. A man in his 60s shuffled in, his back stiff, shoulders hunched by years of pain and service. The frayed edge of an army patch clung to the sleeve of his coat. He handed over a rumpled prescription and said in a voice low with worry, "It's for my wife. She just got out of the hospital." Elra's expression didn't change. She scanned the slip, checked the shelves, and returned with the box. "That'll be," she began, but the man interrupted with a slow exhale. "I don't get my benefits till next week." No flinch, no hesitation, just a soft shake of her head as she gently slid the box across the counter. "She needs it now. Just bring what you can when you can." He stood still for a long moment, lips parted as if trying to find words he hadn't used in years. Then, he tucked the box into his coat and nodded, as if receiving something sacred. "Thank you," he whispered, like it hurt to say it. Inside, Jackson's chest stirred again. This wasn't about charity. It wasn't pity. It was dignity, offered freely, without paperwork, without judgment. Elra wasn't breaking rules for attention. She was restoring something the system had forgotten, the quiet worth of being human. Later that evening, Jackson returned. He didn't rush. He wandered the aisles until the place emptied out. Then he stepped back to the counter. Elra looked up, not startled, just aware. Calm, as always. He leaned forward, voice low. "Do you always do that?" Her head tilted slightly, brows drawing together. Not defensive, just unsure. "Give people medicine they can't pay for?" he clarified. She paused. A small, tired smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Only when it's needed," she said. She didn't explain, didn't justify, and Jackson didn't press. He nodded and turned away, but her answer followed him long after he stepped outside. "Only when it's needed." That night, lying on the motel bed, Jackson stared at the ceiling. That single sentence haunted him, not because it challenged his system, but because it revealed its cracks. His rules had no room for judgment, no space for mercy, and maybe that was the flaw. The next morning, everything changed. It happened just after 10. An elderly woman stumbled near the pharmacy entrance, clutching her chest before collapsing against the glass. Jackson, sipping coffee across the street, dropped his cup and sprinted across just as Elra burst through the door. No hesitation. She knelt, checked the woman's pulse, called her name with calm insistence. She dug through her bag, pulled out a nitroglycerin spray, and administered it with practiced hands. No panic, just focus. Minutes passed. The woman's breathing slowed. Elra stayed with her, leaning her gently against the wall before disappearing inside. She returned with a bottle of water and a packet of pills. "These are hers now," she said softly. "We'll deal with the rest later." Jackson stood frozen. There was no protocol for this, no standard operating procedure, just instinct, just heart. Then the door swung open again, harder this time. Grant. The branch manager stepped inside with the kind of posture that demanded control. Clipboard in hand, his eyes immediately locked onto Elra, still crouched beside the woman. "Again," he barked. "You gave it away without logging it?" Elra stood slowly, steady but quiet. She didn't have time to wait. "That's not your call," Grant snapped, louder now. "We have procedures." Elra didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice or offer excuses. She simply turned back to the woman, helping her into a chair. Grant shook his head and stormed into the back, muttering under his breath. Jackson, still inside now, stayed in the shadows. His fists clenched, but Elra, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't afraid. She didn't care about being right. She cared about doing right. That night, back in his motel room, Jackson opened his phone. He had recorded the moment. Elra rushing to the woman's side, Grant's fury, the calm resolve of someone who'd already made peace with her choices. No narration, no drama, just truth. He attached the footage to an email. Subject line: West Side, Grant, Elra. No name, no signature, just the facts. He also recorded a short voice memo. Elra's tone, Grant's frustration. The muffled footfalls on pharmacy tile. He saved it all. He hadn't made up his mind. Not yet, but this much he knew. It wasn't an anomaly. It was a pattern, and the system, his system, was about to crush the only person willing to do what it wouldn't. By next morning, a response arrived. Cold, official. The footage had been clipped, archived, and flagged. A meeting was scheduled. Immediate action was recommended. Subject line: Policy breach. Urgent review required. The internal memo labeled it a Category 3 violation. Unauthorized dispensing of controlled medication. Repeat behavior. Evidence confirmed. A formal hearing was set for Friday. Elra's name was in bold, Beside it, timestamps, medication codes, audit references. No mention of the woman who collapsed. No context. Just numbers. Just rules. Jackson stared at the screen. The machine he'd built was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Moving fast, without doubt, without pause. And now, it was aimed at someone who had never once tried to hide. By midweek, the atmosphere inside the West Side Pharmacy turned tense. Everyone felt it. Word traveled fast. The register was audited twice a day. Grant hovered. A second employee was assigned to every shift. An unusual move for a branch that small. Still, Elra didn't change. An older man with swollen fingers came in without ID. She gave him half a bottle of arthritis meds. "Come back when you can," she said. A teenage girl mentioned her father skipping doses to afford groceries. Elra didn't ask for documents. She just reached for the shelf. Every time she opened her notebook instead of the official system, she knew what it meant. And she did it anyway. Jackson watched more than ever now. From the back aisle, near the vitamins, pretending to read labels. What he saw wasn't defiance. It wasn't pride. It was resolve. Then came Thursday afternoon. A woman in her 30s rushed in, carrying a small boy against her chest. His breathing was ragged, wheezing, lips pale and tinged with blue. The woman looked frantic, clutching a prescription that had clearly been folded and unfolded too many times. "I can't afford the refill yet," she whispered, "but he hasn't slept. He's getting worse." Elra didn't blink. She grabbed a new inhaler, checked the dose, and handed it over. "Don't let him stop breathing," she said softly. The woman's eyes welled with gratitude and fear. She hugged her son tightly, thanked Elra again and again, and ran out the door. No entry in the system. Just one more line in that worn notebook. Asthma emergency. Return next Friday. From behind the shelf, Jackson watched it all. This wasn't about protocol anymore. This was about breath. And tomorrow, it would all come to a head. The evidence was stacked. Grainy clips of Elra slipping an inhaler into a mother's hand, helping an aging veteran with painkillers, kneeling beside a woman gasping for breath. Grant labeled the report. Clearly, repeated violation, non-compliance, immediate action required. He sent the package to corporate with a terse note. Staff acting outside all approved protocols. Urgent. Minutes later, Jackson received a blind copy. He watched the footage again, not as an executive this time, but as a witness to something more human than policy. The clips, once data points, now felt like turning points. And with each frame, he didn't feel vindicated. He felt trapped, because now the system would want blood. And Elra? She didn't seem the type to beg for mercy. That evening, while Elra helped a patient in the back, Jackson quietly stepped behind the counter. His hands were steady, movements careful. Beneath a stack of health flyers, he found it. The faded blue notebook. The pages were worn, corners bent. He opened it. Inside were first names, dozens, each followed by small personal notes, dosages, repayment dates, simple phrases like bringing cash with sister or partial payment received. Some entries had small circles drawn beside them, paid. Others were still blank. One line caught him. Mr. K paid full. Hugged me after. Jackson felt his throat tighten. This wasn't a ledger. It was memory. An archive of dignity. A record of trust, not debt. Quiet choices scribbled in pen that no compliance report would ever measure. He closed the book slowly and returned it to its hiding place. The truth wasn't in the paperwork. It was written in Elra's compassion. Later that day, as Jackson restocked shelves beside a young employee named Noah, silence stretched between them, until Noah broke it. "She saved my mom," he said quietly, eyes focused on the pill bottles. "It was a Sunday. No clinics. My mom's pressure dropped. I panicked. Called Elra, not even expecting her to answer." Jackson didn't interrupt. She showed up in 20 minutes, with meds from her own bag, sat with us until Mom stabilized. He turned, eyes heavy with something more than gratitude. I've never seen anyone do this job for a better reason. Jackson didn't speak. He didn't need to. That notebook, that moment, that story. They were all stitching together into something bigger than a violation. It was no longer about Elra breaking the rules. It was about whether the rules had ever deserved to be followed without question. That night, Jackson sat in his car behind the pharmacy, engine off, watching the warm light bleed through the back windows. He thought of everything: the footage, the report, the stories no system would ever record. For decades, structure had been his compass. Rules kept people safe. They removed judgment. They minimized risk. But now, the rules felt like chains. Elra had broken policy, yes, but she had honored something deeper, something the system couldn't see. She didn't treat patients. She remembered them, anticipated them, protected them. Jackson found himself asking a question that unsettled him. If the rules can't see that kind of goodness, then what exactly are they protecting? By Thursday, the numbers became headlines. $15,000 in missing medication, 3 months of unauthorized dispensing. What once felt like a moral gray area was now framed as liability. Legal teams flagged federal risks. Insurance partners demanded updates. The language in the emails was clinical, detached. Unapproved dispensing, no billing records, repeat misconduct. Not one line about the woman who nearly stopped breathing. Not one sentence about the child who slept soundly because of a free inhaler. Just metrics. Jackson read them all, and for the first time in his life, he felt like a man trapped inside the machine he built. By Friday morning, the pharmacy felt different. Heavy, tense. Smiles faded. Small talk vanished. Elra was summoned to the back office. Inside, Grant sat flanked by a man on a video call from compliance and a single sheet of paper with her name printed in bold. "We need a written statement," Grant said, voice mechanical. "Full explanation, every instance. Sign and return it by end of day." Elra didn't argue. She didn't even blink. She sat quietly, picked up a pen, and began to write. Jackson watched through the glass like he was witnessing a verdict before a trial. She finished by noon. Her statement was brief. "I dispensed medication without charging patients when I believed delay could cause harm. I did not enter these into the official system. I kept a manual record. I understand this was against policy, but if I were faced with the same moments again, I would do the same thing." The compliance officer raised an eyebrow. "Is that your official position?" "Yes," she said. No defiance. No guilt, just truth. Later that afternoon, Grant pulled Jackson aside near the storeroom, still oblivious to his real identity. "We need to act," he said, lowering his voice. "It's gone too far." He handed Jackson a form. "Suspension pending investigation." A signature line waited near the bottom. Jackson looked at the box labeled "Reason for Suspension." Already filled in. Unauthorized dispensing. Repeated non-compliance. Risk to corporate integrity. He stared at it. "She's good at her job," he murmured. "That's not the point," Grant replied. "Structure exists for a reason. If one person breaks it, others will follow." Jackson didn't sign. He said he needed time, but time was running out. That night, as the last customer left and the lights dimmed, Jackson approached Grant once more. "This can't be handled quietly," he said. Grant blinked. "What?" "If we're going to suspend her, people deserve to hear why. Out loud, not in a memo." "You want a staff meeting?" Grant asked, incredulous. "Yes, everyone in one place. No screens, no PowerPoint, just truth." Grant sighed, annoyed. "We're not here to run town halls." "No," Jackson said calmly. "We're here to serve people. Start with our own." And so, the meeting was set. Saturday morning, before hours, every employee summoned. Compliance would dial in. Elra would speak, this time not behind glass. Not in a report, but to the faces she saw every day. Jackson didn't know what she would say. He just knew she wouldn't lie. The next morning, the staff gathered in the break room. Coffee sat untouched. Some leaned against walls, arms crossed. Others sat silently, unsure. Grant opened the meeting stiffly. "We're here to address repeated violations of company policy regarding medication distribution." A technician spoke first. "She didn't follow the rules. That's all that matters. If she gets a pass, what's the point?" Another voice cut in. "She helped people, real people. Half of us know someone she saved." Voices layered. Tension rose. One group spoke of liability, precedent, policy. The other of kindness, memory, and trust. Jackson stood in the corner, watching the fracture unfold, one he had unknowingly helped build. And then, the front door creaked. Everyone turned. An older man stepped in, leaning on a cane, breath slow and labored. His coat hung loose on narrow shoulders. His voice, though gravelly, was clear. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know I'm not supposed to be here." Grant began to speak, but the older man at the door lifted a trembling hand. "I heard there was a meeting about Elra," he said, his voice roughened by age and memory. His eyes swept the room, stopping at her. "She gave me medicine when no one else would. No forms, no phone calls, no questions." He paused, swallowed hard. "She is the reason I'm still alive." The room held its breath. No movement, no rebuttal. One of the technicians who had earlier condemned her stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. In Jackson's chest, something long buried, some hardened silent weight, cracked open, just enough to feel the air rushing in. This wasn't a defense. It was testimony. Elra rose slowly. No one had asked her to speak, but no one dared stop her either. Her voice was steady, but it carried a lifetime. "The first time I broke protocol," she began, eyes on the table. "It wasn't a decision. It was instinct." A pause. The room leaned closer. "My mother died at home. She had heart failure. We didn't have insurance. I begged the pharmacy to help, but the policy was strict. Payment first." Her hands didn't move. Her face didn't waver. "She passed before I could come back with enough." Another pause. She drew a quiet breath, then said, "I told myself that day, if I ever stood on the other side of that counter, I'd never make someone prove they deserved to breathe." She looked up. "I swore I wouldn't let it happen again." There were no tears, only clarity. Her loss wasn't a wound anymore. It was the shape of who she had become. Silence swept the room, and then Jackson stood. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the old baseball cap on his head, pulled it off, and unzipped his faded coat. The man who had once been anonymous now stood revealed. Gasps echoed. Grant froze mid-breath. "You're," he stammered. "Yes," Jackson said calmly. "I'm the CEO." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I came here undercover to see what was happening. I thought I'd find carelessness, disobedience, maybe theft." He paused, the weight of what followed pressing into every word. "But what I found was humanity. Something our system stopped making room for a long time ago." No one moved. The silence now was reverent, not afraid. Jackson reached into his bag and placed a small speaker on the table. "I want you to hear what I heard." He pressed play. Shaky audio filled the room. Street noise, hurried footsteps, and then Elra's voice. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Stay with me, please." A bottle opened. A paper bag rustled. Water poured. Then her voice again, cracking with desperate compassion. "Please don't die in front of me." Nothing in the room stirred. There was no need. Jackson turned off the speaker. "That moment," he said, his voice low, "was never meant to be policy. But it was everything we've forgotten." He looked around the room. "We built this company to save lives. We make medicine to heal hearts, not break them." A pause. A breath. But somewhere along the way, we built walls instead. We created forms and prices and delays so rigid, The people who needed us most couldn't reach us. We told ourselves rules were necessary, but rules without heart, he looked at Elra, are just chains. No rebuttal came, only quiet recognition. She didn't steal from us, Jackson said. She didn't give away pills for glory. She gave them to people who would have otherwise gone without. Not for gain, not for recognition. Because someone had to. He stepped closer. She didn't break our mission. She honored it, bravely, fully, in a way I forgot was even possible. Elra's eyes stayed down, but her hands, once clenched, now rested open on the table. Jackson swept his gaze across the staff. If this company ever meant to stand for something, let it be what she reminded us of today. Truth doesn't need approval. It needs someone willing to live it. He let the silence breathe again. Then, Elra will not be fired. Murmurs broke through the quiet. Surprise, not resistance. In fact, Jackson continued, starting next month she will serve as lead advisor for a new national program, a patient assistance fund. He turned to her. An initiative to make essential medication available with fewer forms, fewer delays, and more humanity. Around the room, faces softened. Eyes opened. Not everyone agreed, but no one resisted. She knows the real gaps in our system, Jackson said. She's lived them, and she's the reason we'll fix them. Then, from the back, Maya, the same technician who had once demanded suspension, stood up. I was wrong, she said. Her voice didn't shake. I thought rules held this place together, but you were holding people together, quietly, every day. She looked at Elra, not expecting anything in return. Elra didn't speak, just gave her the smallest, most human nod. Shoulders relaxed across the room. Eyes blinked back things unspoken. No cheers, no applause. Just something quiet, something true. Acknowledgement. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't standing firm. It's admitting you misjudged compassion and having the courage to say it out loud. Jackson turned to Grant. We need rules, he said. I built this company on them. A pause. But rules were created to protect people, not to trap them. He stepped closer. When the rules matter more than the lives they're meant to serve, we don't have a system. We have a wall. Grant said nothing. But something softened in his face. Not defiance, reflection. Elra didn't move, but her body eased slowly. Her fingers unclenched, and for the first time in days, she let herself breathe. Then came a smile, not for victory, not for attention, a smile for herself. For the part of her that no longer had to defend kindness. A month passed. Across clinics and pharmacies, envelopes with a new label began to arrive. Patient assistance approved. Inside, vouchers, support cards, instructions printed in clear human language. Patients who once hesitated at the counter now stepped forward with quiet disbelief. Some smiled, some wept, but most just nodded and walked out a little lighter. In one branch, a single mother held her son's inhaler like it was gold. In another, a veteran whispered, I didn't think people like me mattered anymore. Elra didn't need to be there. Her fingerprints were everywhere, not in ink or title, but in the quiet redesign of a system that finally made room for people like her mother, and all those who came after. It was early morning when Elra walked through the dewy cemetery, a small paper bag in her hand. She stopped at a modest headstone. Marisol Lane, beloved mother, 1959 to 2017. She knelt, opened the bag, and placed a single bottle of heart medication at the base of the stone, the kind her mother once needed. Her voice was soft, a whisper to memory. This time, Mom, you won't be turned away. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Some losses don't vanish, they evolve. They shape. They inspire. And in that moment, Elra felt not grief, but peace. Miles away, Jackson stood alone in his glass office, overlooking the skyline etched with his company's name. For years, he believed strength came from control, from how tightly he could hold it all together. But now he knew better. Real strength wasn't rigidity. It was the courage to change when someone showed you a better way. He thought of Elra. She didn't dismantle his legacy. She reminded him why he built it in the first place. That afternoon, he called legal, compliance, regional leads. "We're starting over," he said, "and this time we're doing it right." The file on his desk closed with a soft click. But it wasn't the end. Inboxes across the country lit up. Stories arrived. Quiet, humble, true. Pharmacists doing the same thing, off the record, in the shadows. Not one act of kindness, but a movement. And maybe, just maybe, the system was beginning to wake up. Because if you think compassion only lives in one small pharmacy on the forgotten side of town, you haven't heard what happened in the South. Not yet, but you will.